choose the title Body Counts?
It came out of a conversation with a 20 or 21-year-old guy named Matthew Biden, who I met when I spoke at Simon's Rock at Bard College. And he says, you know, the theme of your life is really about controlling your body and struggling for control of your body. As a child from those who were abusing me, as a young adult struggling to, own my own sexuality, taking it really from the church. Certainly the struggle with the virus, the struggle with the meds since then. And that's also consistent with really the political consciousness that was so formative for me as a 10, 11, 12-year-old, getting engaged in feminism and really being influenced by the feminist movement in the late 60s and the early 70s, which was really around reproductive rights and control of one's body.
During the time you were writing, 2 ACT UP documentaries came out, as did other works about AIDS history. In what ways did these films and other work about AIDS coming out influence you as you were writing the book?
ACT UP was incredibly important to me. I write about it a lot in the book. But when ACT UP was founded, first of all, Randy Schiltz had already written and the band played on when ACT UP was founded. There was a whole history before ACT UP. The history that preceded ACT UP in some ways I think was more radical, and it certainly had a bigger influence on me in terms of shaping my perspective on my advocacy. That was the People with AIDS Coalition and the Denver Principles and the self-empowerment movement that was really modeled after the women's health movement, where people with AIDS were really doing everything themselves. We were starting organizations to control the research agenda. We were starting organizations to provide the care. We were not expecting the government to do these things for us. No institution of power had cared for us. Not the churches, not the government, not the schools we went to, not our families. When Michael Cowan and Richard Berkowitz and Bobby Campbell and Dan Turner and a group of about a dozen guys with AIDS gathered in Denver, Colorado, it was the very first time that a group of people with AIDS from around the country got together to organize and assert a political voice and say, we have a right to be involved in this decision making. It's about us, it's our lives. You can't go and do this without us. That was very important. They created a document, a manifesto called the Denver Principles. That was the very first time in the history of humanity that people who shared a disease organized and asserted a political voice. It had never, ever happened before. Then when ACT UP started, it was also important, but very different. It wasn't about people with AIDS doing these things for themselves. It was about people with AIDS getting together and putting pressure on the government and speeding up the drug delivery process. And ultimately, it became mostly about treatment activism, because the drugs were in the pipeline and they were just beyond our grasp, and there was, this one come out and help a little bit for a while, and we were so focused on that all of the other issues, these sort of human rights related issues, the broader empowerment issues, dealing with stigma, patient autonomy, ended up getting sidelined. And that's where AIDS advocacy began. And so then through the 90s, the AIDS activist movement was mostly around treatment activism. And now, in the last few years, I think people have realized we are not going to treat our way out of the epidemic. The stigma isn't going to go away with a pill. And I think there's been a little bit of a renaissance in looking at the human rights-based approach to the epidemic, which I also write about towards the end of the book in the Saro Project, the work that I'm engaged in now.